What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. The last time we were working on the race car, we bought a new battery, made a new battery tray. Robbie made a new battery box, and we got our battery secured and located in the trunk of the race car. And now it's time to move on to the next thing we're going to be working on, which is inside this package here. And we're going to unbox that right now and let you guys in on the next thing we're going to be working on today. Check that out. We've got ourselves a 5-gallon aluminum fuel cell. So I had the dilemma with the whole fuel system here on the race car, where my factory fuel tank and the whole system had rotted away from leaving race gas unattended in the thing for over a couple years, and it was going to cost me an arm and a leg. Like, I found a factory fuel tank for about 120 bucks, which wasn't too bad, but trying to find myself another fuel pump assembly to throw that fuel pump that Nick gave to me to get this thing going real quick was going to cost me roughly like $300 to $400 to find just the fuel pump assembly, because I could not find anyone that had a used one at any of the salvage yards here. And my only option at that point to save money wise, and why not, because race car purpose, was to pick up a fuel cell and get a bunch of fittings and a fuel line and connectors and stuff so that we can run an aftermarket 5-gallon racing fuel cell in the trunk of the race car, which is why I had to abandon having just the trunk sheet metaled off for my battery, and we had to actually permanently enclose it into a battery box, because we are going to have a fuel tank here in the trunk of the car, and tech inspection was not going to be happy until that battery was locked nice and safe inside a metal containment. So take a look at this fuel cell here real quick. It actually looks pretty nice. It's all aluminum. I picked it up for about 60 bucks, I think it was. This one's a 5-gallon. It's got two 10-AN fittings here on the top for however you want to run it, I guess. The welds look pretty decent on the tank, and it looks like they built a sump setup into the bottom of the tank to run our fuel lines out of, which they also included some caps to cover another set of dash 10 AN fittings. The tank also has its own fuel sending unit inside, which if I remember right, it said it was a 90 ohm fuel sending unit, so I also had to order a different fuel gauge to match the ohm rating for our new fuel sending unit for our 5-gallon race tank. Now it's just going to be a matter of how we're going to mount this thing in, how I want to mount this thing in, and let's figure this out. So this is roughly about where I'm going to want to end up placing the tank here in the trunk. And I do want to have my sumps facing towards the rear of the car, because when the car's under load, under throttle, fuel is going to want to slosh towards the back side of the tank, and that will just ensure us that, like, at any point if I'm low on fuel, that when I'm under throttle, that the fuel is always going to make its way down here to my lines, and I'm going to end up running somehow this way and back up around, or I don't know. I'll figure that one out. For now, we're going to have to figure out exactly how to get this thing mounted here in the trunk, and I think I'm just going to have to steal Young Static's idea, unfortunately, and go get some 1-inch square tubing and figure out a way to run some crossbars from front to back of the trunk, and get some mounting points put up for this tank. Grab some materials from the store, and we'll scratch our head on how to accomplish this. Alright, so I got back from the hardware store. I picked up 2 4-foot pieces of 1-inch steel square tubing and cut one of them down into 2 2-foot pieces. Got it all set up on my cut-off saw. Got my angles cut out for the idea I was saying I was stealing from Young Static. My 1-inch flat strap with some holes drilled and nuts welded in are all welded together here on my cut angles. Then I had to jerry rig up this little bar here with a level and, you know, some stuff here to find a way to mark where I wanted to have these mounted up here into the trunk and get my holes marked for drilling, to ensure that I'm going to have both pieces mounted at the same height as each other, level to the actual frame rails of the car. The rails are now bolted down in to the car. We'll just set the tank up on here real quick and show you exactly what else I've got going on here. Alright, so I've got the tank set up in here, just kind of sitting here just to make sure that my spacing is going to be where I need it to be for my bolts to be perfectly centered down on both pieces of the frame rail. And I went ahead and took a measuring tape and measured the gap in between each point on these rails so that I could cut some more pieces of square tubing so that I can completely frame out this whole piece. So I have one piece that will fit in right here, and then I'll have another piece that's going to fit in back here. That way I can have this whole piece as one unit, and I'll have more added structure sitting underneath the fuel tank right here. Then we can mark our holes for our fuel tank and figure out how to get this thing leveled out. I'm almost finished with really the whole hard part of doing this whole mounting the tank in the vehicle. Everything's all welded together. It actually looks pretty good. I'm really happy with how this is turning out. So now everything's going to be flush, level, even, perfectly square. It's all one piece. So now I'll have an easier time getting this thing bolted into the car by myself without needing an extra set of hands. Now I can set my fuel tank on here. We'll mark our holes to drill out where we're going to need to make our bolt up points for the tank. And we'll get those drilled out. We'll find some nuts, get those welded up, find some bolts, and we'll get the tank bolted to this piece. We'll set it back in the car, and we'll go from there. The main framework for the tank is almost finished fabricated. I've got it here bolted in on the back side. Now I just have to figure out what I'm going to do about my brackets to attach down here at the bottom of the trunk. So I've already got a couple pieces of angle iron cut out. And with the same method of how I figured out my height for the back, I've got it set up here in the trunk for the front side of it, where I can just push down on it, and it's right there where it needs to be. And I'll be able to mark my spot to weld my tabs together on this thing. We'll get it all welded together. A couple more holes drilled in it, a couple more nuts welded to it, And then this thing should pretty much be good and solid mounted into the trunk of this car. The fuel cell mounting framing is now completed. All the brackets have been welded on. I've got all my nuts welded in place for all my bolts to bolt together. You can see all my holes where the tank bolts up to my framing. All my nuts welded down here on the bottom side. And before I put this thing in the car, which I've got all the holes drilled and ready for this thing to be mounted in, I'm going to get it painted black to match the battery box that we just finished up last week. Then we'll get this thing bolted into the car, we'll mount the fuel cell in the car, and we'll check out how that looks. We are just about finished up with this thing. Paint is dry. I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. Got new bolts, lock washers, flat washers, big washers. So we'll get this thing bolted up into the car, we'll get the tank mounted up to the frame, and we'll see how everything turned out. The tank is mounted in, nice and solid. This thing ain't going anywhere. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. It's a big load of work out of the way for the fuel system, but that's just the tank. I've still got a lot more work to do to get this car done. We're gonna have to run all new fuel lines, external pump and external inline filter and all kinds of stuff. So we have a lot of things going on before we're at the home stretch to get this car back and out on the drag strip. And I'm sorry it took so long to get this portion of the project finished and out to you guys. It has been storming off and on a lot more this monsoon season than usual, and we have a lot of things going on here on the property. I'll let you guys in on that next time. So just gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys for everything. We're almost to 250 subs. Let's keep this thing growing. You know, the whole YouTube thing. Like, comment, share, most importantly, subscribe. Until next time, guys, peace out.